Yeah, g'day, kia ora, Pastor Carl Bromley here, and I want to do a follow-up to a post that I made recently and a couple of videos regarding a quote from Winston Peters, New Zealand's Foreign Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and leader of the New Zealand First political party, probably the most conservative political party we have in New Zealand, and the hope of many New Zealanders in the face of a very left-wing government in terms of, I would say, National, who is the opposite wing on the same bird as Labour, the Greens, Te Pātau Māori. I view National really as nothing more than a placeholder, holding a position until the next election to see a more overtly left-wing government take power again. But I made a post a couple of days ago. I made a couple of posts actually regarding Winston Peters' statements in reference to Charlie Kirk's politically motivated violent assassination. That's what it has been called from day one by officials in the United States, including the governor of Utah, who wanted to make it very plain and clear that this was a political assassination. And by nature, assassinations are obviously violent. This was political violence. Now, I'm going to read verbatim something I've written out today because I don't want to just talk about it. I don't want to just post it up there. I'm going to read this out off a bit of a treatise, I guess you might call it, in regards to the response and somewhat defensive response from people wanting to defend, it seems, Winston Peters' statement. Now, I don't know if he needs defending or not, and my comments about it seem to have sparked some indignance and a reaction by New Zealand First supporters and Winston Peters supporters that have actually culminated today in even some sad directives and accusation, patronisation toward me by someone I actually love and considered and thought was a dear friend. And this happens, it seems that when I voice my opinion passionately as I do, and I do my best to respond with challenge and debate, that often I find a very clear pattern of dialogue that descends into something that ends up with accusing me, directing me, telling me what I need to do, and questioning my motives, and in a very negative way. And that's, I find it really sad, because then it descends into disrespect and leaves in a position of questioning those friendships and where they can go and at what level. And I'm quite baffled by that. I am an analytical person. I've been around for a while in areas of relationships, of relationship analysis, very analytical. My professional career has called me to be such a person, as a therapist, as someone who's studied personality psychology in depth for many years. I am by nature quite analytical. I do look at things beyond the surface. Words do mean something to me. The way that people say things, the way that people particularly choose their words and statements means something to me, particularly when you're dealing with seasoned, experienced politicians. So anyway, to say no more about that for now, I'm going to read out something that I've written this morning in response to my statements on Facebook concerning Winston Peters' quotes regarding the Charlie Kirk violent political assassination. That, as I said, officials in the States have been calling it political violence from the start. It's quite obvious. He was shot in the neck at a Turning Point USA meeting, which is basically a political movement of the conservative spectrum, challenging progressive liberals and leftist politics, and he was specifically targeted with one shot, one bullet in the neck, killing this man, this dear, good Christian man, conservative man, while conducting a political rally. And I don't know why so many Kiwis would be so reluctant to call it exactly what it obviously was from the beginning. That officials, including the governor of Utah, President Trump, and many of the American administrative officials, conservative officials, are calling it a political attack, political violence, and yes, in the form, sadly and tragically, of an assassination. So anyway, scroll on, whatever, for anyone interested, which may be very few, because at the end of the day, I'm not a part of the elite, no better, no betters. I'm more in the circle of a nobody, no one, I'm sure, no doubt. So for anyone who's interested, I'm going to read this, and I'll post a couple of the photographs of Winston Peters' quote, and also a quote that has actually modified Winston Peters' quote, actually from Yahoo, as a reported from Fox, which is fascinating in itself. Anyway, whatever, in the spirit of Charlie Kirk, here's me exercising my freedom of speech, my freedom of expression on political issues and whatever issues I want to, as some of the God-given right to express a freedom of speech and opinion. And I'm not going to hate you, attack you with ad hominem just because you disagree with me and have your opinion. I'm going to love you and respect you, do my best to respect you and honor you, even if you don't agree with me. And I do find it, for anyone listening, very sad that you would descend into attacking me and questioning my motives and telling me what I need to do, what I'm doing right or wrong, and how I should be projecting my opinion and accusing me of outrage and needing to cool it down and stuff, especially in the context of something so diabolical, so wicked and evil, and so traumatizing as Charlie Kirk's murder. You know, I think it's actually quite disgusting that people tell me to tone it down and censure me for having outrage in the context of what's happened the last few days. Something that has personally impacted me in the core of my being, to the point of utter grief over what's happened for many reasons and on many layers. It's going to take a while to unpack over the days and months and years to come, really. But yeah, I'd almost like to say, in the spirit of Greta Thunberg, how dare you? Anyway, here we go. So my post on Winston's quote regarding describing Charlie Kirk's assassination as Winston quoted, not political violence, it is an assassination, quote unquote, has created some dialogue on Facebook. I do hear what people are saying, and I actually expected the very argument in defense of Winston's statement. I expected it to come. That is, that he was attempting to say what happened to Charlie was worse than political violence. That's the argument in defense people have come up with that I expected. I personally rejected that viewpoint prior to my post for a number of reasons. One, politicians choose words very carefully for political reasons. They're very careful to choose the words they use. Winston Peters is a seasoned political warhorse with extensive political experience and a background in law. He understands words and is a master at using them, in my view. Furthermore, this quote was in written form, published on at least 2 social media platforms, X and Facebook, on his official platforms, which heightens the degree of precision, I believe, Winston gave to choosing the very words of that quote. Secondly, the words experienced politicians use are chosen for political benefit and political impact. That's why they're so careful about the words they choose, especially if published. So, the words used by Winston Peters in the quote, that he said that Charlie Kirk's death was not political violence, it is assassination, creates firstly ambiguity. And ambiguity enables politicians to benefit from the hearer being able to ascribe what interpretation they wish and that is more comfortable for them to ascribe, in allowing them to continue to support that politician. In other words, ambiguity means that people reading a politician's statement can filter it, and they can frame it in a way that feels comfortable for them, that allows them to want to continue supporting this politician. So people can come to Winston's defense and say, for example, no, Winston is not deflecting from the reality that this assassination was politically motivated. He's just using terminology to heighten the expression of the severe nature of the murder. So by Winston saying this murder was not political violence, people defending him saying he's saying that because he wants to use a term more powerful than political violence, assassination. So the ambiguity lends itself to people to have this interpretation if they want to feel more comfortable with Winston Peters. Sounds good, right? What this does is deflects, minimizes, and plays down the innate political aspect of this extreme political violent assassination. So Winston's statement actually allows the minimization and playing down, the deflecting away of the reality of what happened to Charlie Kirk was motivated politically. Okay, so people can defend Winston and take that position. His statement allows it. But on the other hand, because of the ambiguity, another set of people can take the same statement if it's more amenable to them and say, yes, Winston is right. Politics had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination, because Winston says it was not political violence. So they can say, yes, Winston's right. Charlie's assassination had nothing to do with politics or political motivation, because people can be assassinated, obviously, for different reasons, different motivations other than politics. They can be assassinated because of mental unwellness, because they're crazy, because they have a personal vendetta with someone, or perhaps they might even be jealous of their success, their family, their joy. Maybe they have an issue with their faith. So there are other reasons, obviously, that people can be assassinated, that don't include politics. So you can see Winston Peters' statement is ambiguous and allows people then to formulate their own disposition or interpretation of what he said to gain and garner political support from more people. Ambiguity allows politicians to have also the power of deniability. They love this. So deniability allows a politician to say, like Winston Peters, I never said it was politically motivated. Or, on the other side, he can turn it around and say, I wasn't saying that it wasn't politically motivated. And this is what I get sick and tired of with political claptrap. That politicians talk out of both sides of their mouth. They're very skilled at it, and they double talk. Now, furthermore, as in with Winston's statement, using terminology like he did is confusing. He used terminology in a confusing manner, that is, using terms that innately, by nature, imply the same meaning as if they don't. That's confusing. Political violence is violence. And assassination is also violence. Whether it is political or not, violence is violence. And assassination is violence. So when he says, it makes a statement that Charlie Kirk's death is not political violence, it is assassination, is using terminologies that basically express the same thing but implying there's something different. That's confusing. To make a statement that Charlie Kirk's assassination was not political violence, it is assassination, is a nonsensical, illogical statement if it's innocent. And if it is innocent, it would reflect a person of limited grammatical understanding and intelligence. But I would argue that that is not such a person. That Winston Peters is a person who has great understanding of grammar and words and is a master at using them and choosing them specifically for political reasons. Confusion over words breeds controversy, which is often a political ploy for political gain. And, case in point, my statements about Winston's statement have created controversy, even to the point of another example of a dear friend I love attacking me, patronizing me, accusing me of things, judging my motives, evaluating my motives. Folks, Winston Peters' quote is the same quote, word for word, on both social media platforms, X and Facebook. Now, here's something interesting I want to draw your attention to that evidences and validates the issues I'm raising here. And you may or may not care about it if you don't scroll on. But interestingly, Fox News, as reported on Yahoo News, as they reported on the response of world leaders to Charlie Kirk's assassination, they seemed, in my view, to struggle with Winston's quote as well. They seem to struggle with this quote as much as I have. Why? Because they felt the need, obviously, to break his quote up and insert their own modifiers that would seem to then take on the nature of interpretation that people are taking on, a number of people taking on, to make Winston's statement more palatable and logical. So rather than just quoting Winston verbatim as his own official social media platforms did on X and Facebook, Yahoo News reported it like this. And I'm going to quote from their quote. Okay? I'm not going to quote all of it. I'm going to jump down to the main bits. You can look it up yourself. Fox News on Yahoo said New Zealand's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters, describes the rise of political violence. Now, just note, that's not a quote from Winston. That's what they are saying. They are using the term political violence, not Winston here. Okay? Then they go on to quote Winston Peters verbatim. And then they, to the point, Winston Peters, quote, "It is tragic that we now live in a world that a difference of opinion are met with a gun." And then they stop his quote there and they add, this is Fox News, he said on X, noting that the death of Kirk is not merely, and then they quote Winston again, political violence, unquote, but, quote again, assassination, unquote. Now, yes, I am analytical because words mean stuff, especially in politics, okay? And politics affects our laws, policies, politics, and what people say and how they say it reflects issues to do with character and integrity, which relate to things like trust and trustworthiness. So this does matter to people like me. It might not matter to you, to me it does. So what Fox News did here through Yahoo is they broke Winston's quote up and they inserted the words "not merely," something Winston never said. So they are basically saying Winston said that Charlie Kirk's assassination was not merely political violence, but assassination. He never said that. They added it. And yes, many people jump into Winston's defense and attacking me, actually. That's what they say that Winston was saying. Oh, what he's trying to say is it wasn't merely political violence, but assassination. No. Winston purposefully, specifically downplayed, minimized, and deflected the political nature of this assassination. And even in his quote here, even in this quote here, he says, "It's tragic we live in a world with a difference of opinion and now met with a gun." The omission of political opinion, again, adds to my point. The downplaying of political violence in this world today. Now, you can agree or disagree, think other points, and I think I'm splitting hairs, as a dear friend accused me of, or being outraged at this. And how dare I be outraged about this? I should be outraged at the gunman who pulled the trigger, which was absolute straw man, insulting thing to say to me. As if I'm not outraged about this vile demonic killing, because I have wept and shed buckets of tears, figuratively speaking, but many tears, grieving over what happened to my brother in Christ, a very good man who reflects and amplified and projected an incredible testimony as a Christian man, and a conservative, courageous Christian man, not ashamed to come out and address life issues as a child of God, as a Christian, on political platforms, unlike many other professed Christians who are too scared and cowardice to actually come out and put their head above the parapet in our nation. And sadly, I actually find it rather easy to attack people and kick people like me, who, in my imperfections and frailties at least, are willing to show passion, which is not a sin, by the way, and actually speak up and stand up and speak out at the risk of being attacked violently and physically, as I have been, by the way, both domestically and by our government, literally through the terrorist raid we had. And not only that, then to be attacked, condemned and judged by those who are supposed to be friends, or at least on the same page politically, because I have an opinion and a view with merit, with validity, about a politician such as Winston Peters, who has not always been the most forthright, open, direct, unambiguous political figure in this nation. I'll get on to that in a minute. But anyway, I'm starting to rant. I'm going to drop down a little bit, and I'm going to talk about my personal view of Winston Peters here and why I've backed off New Zealand First. As one who supported Winston Peters, having forgiven him a number of times for decisions that have been morally questionable, e.g. on abortion, Jacinda Ardern's rise to power, the signing of the Turkey Immigration Pact, I've recently withdrawn my overt and general support of Winston and New Zealand First, in light of his recent expressed willingness to condemn Israel as a nation, to kick them while they're down, dealing with the terrorist threat of Gaza, as they have been happy to jump on the bandwagon to kick Israel while they're down, along with many other Western politicians. Winston and New Zealand First have failed to stand with strength with Israel, and as such have actually been applauded by those who would not otherwise support them, i.e. the Free Palestine pro-Hamas terrorist movement, which is pro-Hamas terrorism by default. And I know there are many who are waving the Palestinian Free Palestine flag innocently with little knowledge, and that's shame on them for being ignorant. And by doing so, waving the flag and chanting their chants from the river to the sea, expressing their support for the annihilation and genuine genocide of Israel. We don't see Winston Peters and New Zealand First coming out heavy and strong and courageous, condemning this genocidal rhetoric and protests and flag waving from the left. No, they jump on board with condemning Israel in their darkest hour, kicking them while they're down. So all this stuff, historically, Winston Peters, New Zealand First, has placed me in a position of being very skeptical of the things he's saying and quite analytical. Is it just me? Now, I'm watching very mindfully as to how Winston Peters and New Zealand First and all the New Zealand government votes this month at the United Nations in terms of whether or not they support recognising Palestine as a state before all the hostages are released and before or without Hamas being eliminated from the influence of governance in any way, shape or form in Gaza. I'm watching very mindfully. You don't see our politicians wearing the yellow ribbon, do you? Getting hot under the collar, passionate about these hostages not being released yet, about the agenda of Hamas and many of the Palestinians in that realm wanting the displacement and riddance and genocide of Israel as a national state. You don't see that, but you see them jump on the bandwagon, put the boot in, don't you? Anyway, to recognise Palestine as a state without all the hostages being returned, and while Hamas or alike in any form or degree remain, would be an absolute reprehensible, immoral position to take. And I don't know how any God-fearing Christian person or any person with any moral aptitude and consistency would support any party that is willing to endorse a Palestinian state while all hostages, before all hostages are released, and while Hamas or any hate-filled ideological government remains in influence in that region. So there's more to unpack here than just Winston's statement. There's a lot of background and context to why I take the position I take. And you might... So, I am unapologetically skeptical of Winston Peters' statements, and whilst my dear friends might think that to be splitting hairs, and while they may choose to defend his weaknesses in narrating a different interpretation of his clear literal statements, I remain skeptical. My analysis is not based superficially on a one-off, off-the-cuff statement from a naive, inexperienced politician. Quite the opposite. And you might ask, so what? So what? And I'm getting ready to come to the end of my presentation here. So what, you might ask? So a lot. Because at the end of the day, it's all about trustworthiness and integrity. Without integrity and being trustworthy, there is no wisdom in supporting any such politician or leader. Because without integrity and earned objective trustworthiness, such a politician is capable of anything given the right set of timing and circumstances. We saw this during COVID. I have been incredibly gracious and forgiving and stretching to understand some of the historical calls Winston Peters has made. And perhaps I've been too forgiving and too gracious. Hasn't been much progress on the extreme abortion bill, has there, since New Zealand First has been in coalition? Right? I say as an aside, case in point, I now stand as a skeptic, and I will need to see some pretty incredible character and integrity borne out in some pretty strong, courageous positions from Winston and New Zealand First before I consider another step, if ever, in support of him and his party. I'm never saying never, and I understand that you've got to go with the best of whatever options you have before them, even though you may not agree with all the options available and everything. But I tell you what, a position on Israel is a line in the sand for me. It really is, because there's so much that goes along with that. The Israel issue come this month would be an excellent opportunity for Winston Peters and New Zealand First to show some credible character and moral values that might entice me and others who think like me to some level of future endorsement. I'm going to watch really closely to see what they decide. And if they endorse Palestine as a state before all hostages are released, and whilst there is some influence of governance by Hamas or any other like hateful anti-Israel, anti-West ideological organisation, that's it. I'm done with them. I will not vote for a party who will endorse that. So to conclude my post, come back round full circle regarding my statement and post regarding Winston Peters' statement that Charlie Kirk's death was not political violence, it was an assassination. I want to say this: murder is implicitly violent. Assassination is implicitly violent. Politicians can use words and do use words very wisely and carefully. The overt published denying of Charlie Kirk's assassination, as stated clearly by Winston, as not political violence, was no mistake in my view, and more reflective of slick politics using words to deflect and minimize the political influence of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Assassination and murder are implicitly violent, but not necessarily political. You may judge me as being over analytical and splitting hairs. Go for it. What the Apostle Paul said, actually, your judgment of me means very little. It means a little bit of something, of course, but it's very little. I'd be interested to hear from anyone on the comments on this post if you actually see any of my points, if you actually get where I'm coming from. In reference and honour to Charlie Kirk's values, if I can humbly paraphrase a little of what I perceive Charlie believed, which I also believe and stand by, that is open debate. and the freedom to share one's opinions and views as a God-given right, which if done honourably and with respect, and at best with love, ought to prevent violence and enable understanding that will hopefully work to make the world a better place for all. Words are powerful things. And I'll leave you with a verse of scripture that attests to that. Proverbs 18:21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof." Words are powerful. They mean something. And that's why I'm a bit of an analytical person when it comes to what people say, how they say it, and within what context. Minutes, hours, days, months, years. Anyway, for those listening, thanks for listening. I just wanted to get this down on video, online, rather than just writing it. And I will put up those images from Winston's quote and from Fox reporting for Yahoo. I appreciate you, love you, thank you, and it breaks my heart to have people I love, dear friends who I love and have loved, stood by for a long time, becoming hostile toward me, accusing me of things, patronizing me, because I've expressed my point of view and my opinion passionately, because I am a man of passion, and that's not a sin to be one. Be angry and sin not. Have passion, have zeal. So to my friends out there who have chosen a perspective of hostility towards me, that hate, that saddens my heart, and I'm sorry you've done that, as many have done in the past, but I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop living for an audience of one and expressing my point of views and beliefs through the God-given right that he has given me, and not only that, the calling he's given me, and because of the way that God has wired me up. That puts me in some lonely circles, it puts me on the edge, I know that. And I will try my best. I will try my best, as you may not believe I endeavour to do so, to speak the truth in love. And I know I come across passionately, and perhaps the way I come across passionately doesn't reveal very well the tender love and care I have in my heart, not just for my friends, but for the vilest of my enemies. God bless you. Mā te wā. Bye for now. See ya.